Welcome back. This is Inside Politics. Thank you for staying with us here on KTN News. After weeks of public outcry over the potential outbreak and the country's preparedness to fight the deadly coronavirus, Kenyans can now have a sigh of relief after High Court Judge Justice John Makau ordered the suspension of all flights from China. The order was issued even as President Uhuru Kenyatta announced the establishment of a National Emergency Response Committee comprising of cabinet secretaries to coordinate Kenya's preparedness, prevention and response to tackle coronavirus.
Few weeks have seen fear gripping the country as the deadly coronavirus claimed more lives worldwide. And Friday morning, Kenyans' prayers appeared answered when High Court Judge Justice John Makau issued tough orders suspending all flights from China. Justice Makau also ordered the government to forthwith trace, account, re-examine, confine and quarantine in a Kenya Defense Forces or a specially guarded medical facility all 239 passengers who arrived in Kenya from China on Wednesday until they are duly certified to be free from coronavirus. And as pressure mounted on the government to act, President Kenyatta issued Executive Order No. 2 that established the National Emergency Response Committee on Coronavirus, comprising of 21 members. Among them, newly appointed Cabinet Secretary for Health, Mutahi Kagwe, who is the chair, Cabinet Secretary Foreign Affairs, Rachel Omamo, Transport Infrastructure, Housing, Urban Development and Public Works, CS, James Macharia, Defense CS, Monica Juma, and ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs, CS, Joe Musheru. The committee is expected to, among other things, coordinate Kenya's preparedness, prevention and response to the threat of coronavirus, enhance surveillance at all points or ports of entry in Kenya, coordinate capacity building of medical personnel and other professionals so as to enable the country to respond quickly to any suspected cases of the disease, and coordinate supply of testing kits, critical medical products or supplies, masks and other protective gear within the Republic. President Kenyatta further ordered the completion of the National Isolation and Treatment Facility at Mbagathi Hospital within 7 days from Friday, together with the identification and preparation of isolation and treatment facilities in Level 5 and referral hospitals across the country by the 15th of March 2020. And here in Kenya, the Chinese embassy also moved to assure Kenyans of measures it had taken to prevent the spread of coronavirus. In a tweet Friday, the embassy said, due to the decreasing volume of passenger flow, China Southern Airlines has made necessary adjustments by suspending flights connecting Guangzhou, Changsha and Nairobi until further notice. This means the traffic flow from China, the epicenter of coronavirus, to Kenya would now be cut, thus reducing the chances of the spread of coronavirus. Grace Kuria, KTN News.
It is one of the biggest stories on the global agenda, on the global scene. Everyone, everywhere across the world is talking about coronavirus. Kenyans have been asking, is the country ready to deal with the virus? We've had, we reported of a case of the virus at the Kenyatta National Hospital, which has so far been cleared. There was a China Southern Airlines flight that landed in Nairobi this past week with 239 passengers on board, and it brought a lot of angry reactions from Kenyans asking why the government was being so lackluster with this. The government assuring Kenyans that everybody that was coming from China was being thoroughly checked before they board the planes here, and of course that 14-day quarantine, which a lot of Kenyans have been dismissing, saying they do not know what it means. But the High Court did finally suspend all flights from China. But the question remains, Dismas, is Kenya ready, in your opinion? And what is your take on how the government has dealt with this so far?
Well, you know, as a Kenyan, it's almost impossible to form an opinion whether or not we are ready. Because one of the things that the Jubilee administration has done successfully is a failure in communication. If you don't have the president coming out in good time talking, or people at Affairs House telling us what they've done, then they leave a huge vacuum which is filled by rumors and propaganda. So right now, probably Kenya is ready, and President Kenyatta knows, and Mutahi Kagwe knows, but the rest of the Kenyans do not know. There's been horrible communication. And you know, when Kenyatta was sworn into office as a president, he was given a sword to take care of lives and properties. So taking care of Kenyans' lives is his principal responsibility. And if the coronavirus is going to be a threat to our lives, it's supposed to be treated as an emergency. There needs to be proactive communications. Right from the time the coronavirus was spotted in China, nobody from the government has come out to tell us what is being done till you see a flight coming from China, and it takes somebody to go to the High Court for a judge to issue orders, a judge whose only specialty is law, to come and give those very firm instructions. And one would assume the judge gave instructions because of incompetence, that we are not seeing anything which is happening. But some of the orders he gave were really very interesting and amazing, that he doesn't want the Chinese to come to Kenya or some flights to come to Kenya, which I find to be some sort of voodoo logic. Because Kenya, we operate in the global system. There's no way you're going to tell people that they cannot land. Somebody may be from that province in China, then he goes to Ghana, he goes to Nigeria, and they come to Nairobi. So maybe what we need is to have a very solid infrastructure of how we are going to manage the virus. If people come to Kenya at a certain airport from, say, China, how do we isolate them somewhere? And then even how do we place surveillance? Because we are told that people are supposed to engage in self-quarantine. If a fella goes to his home, I mean, is there a guarantee that he's going to stay in his house alone for the next 14 days? So in my view, I think the government, maybe they've done something, but the communication has been horrible. And the idea of thinking that we can close our airspace to international players is a logic which is upside down. Because if you say you're going to stop flights, what of Kenyans want to go and sell tea in China, or people want to do global business? Right now we are told there is one incident in the UK, there have been 2 in the US. So are we going to tell British Airways, don't go to Nairobi? Are we going to tell Americans, don't come to Kenya? I think what we need to do is for Mutahi Kagwe to come and reassure us that anybody who lands in Kenya is going to be screened, and if we suspect that you're having the virus, you're going to be kept in isolation. If you're okay, come and do business. Okay. But they need to reassure us that the surveillance works.
Good points. Be that as it may, what you've just said, Nairobi is ranked 6th riskiest city in Africa, based on the number of flights and connections. Ken, is what he's saying he has a point in what he's saying, but at the same time, based on our interactions with some of these cities and Chinese and the flights and the connections, Nairobi being the 6th riskiest city on the African continent, that is a reason to worry, given the fact that our health system has left a lot to be desired.
Mm. And I think, just like my brother Mokua is saying, we have a responsibility towards other international players. We are a country on the international plane. However, our obligation to other sovereign states should never compromise our own security, our own lives. And that is why the judge was justified, because he has a duty under the Constitution to interpret the law in a manner that, one, secures the rule of law, and 2, reinforces the rights and fundamental freedoms in our constitutions as guaranteed to citizens. Remember, as Kenyan citizens, we have a right to health, to a clean and secure environment. If we have an external threat that government is unwilling to deal with, then courts have a duty in interpreting and enforcing the Bill of Rights to issue orders such as Macau's, compelling government not to allow Chinese flights into Kenya. That is not to sever links with China. Of course, diplomatic relations is as between governments and states. If the Jubilee government is going to compromise the life of Kenyans in a bid to please their diplomatic partners or trade partners in the name of China, then courts must intervene. We cannot leave our airport free for all and just say we are screening. It is better to deal with the threat and prevent the occurrence of this particular epidemic in this country than preparing Bagadi and saying, now Chinese can land. We are ready for this problem. As a nation, we do not have resources that are sufficient to deal with this coronavirus if it came in the magnitude that the virus is coming. And this is similar to what I may term as security advisories that other states have been giving to their citizens. When we have a threat in Kenya, you will see the US and the UK giving advisories. Why is it wrong for Kenya to say, for this particular time, let us not accept these flights, not in bad faith, but as a global concern? No one will take an offense in it.
Do you think other state departments are in the same wavelength, on the same wavelength as Justice Macau? We saw the Kenya Airways employee who leaked that video being suspended by the company. Do you think there's the same will from all the government players?
They are not at the same will with all the government players. One, because, you know, China is our very good. We have all been looking to the east. We no longer look at the west. And therefore, it takes courage for a government and its departments to tell China that, look, because of this threat, let us suspend a few things and a few dealings. So all the state departments are not going to support this. All state departments are not happy, but it is a good thing for Kenyans.
But when you raise a serious issue about this airline, in my view, it's really embarrassing for KQ to fire that gentleman. Because the gentleman is merely pursuing a public interest. So how do you fire somebody who is pursuing public interest? And then the next day, President Kenyatta says, if you see corruption or anything else, come out as a whistleblower. Okay. How will Kenya have guts to come and do these things?
All right.
It is our habit of killing the messenger. I think this gentleman, Mr. Gira Ali, deserves an EBS, not even an HSC, because he actually stood in the public interest. But this is what happens to whistleblowers. But I've been reflecting on this coronavirus, and I say to myself, what occupies the minds of Kenyans? It's food security issues. Look at the locusts. It's health. Look at toxins, cancer, and now coronavirus. It's power. We can't afford our electricity. It's commerce. Look at the cost of doing business in Kenya today. So when you load something like the coronavirus, and I would actually argue and say corruption is Kenya's #1 coronavirus, because you're told it's not so bad, everyone will have it, your mortality is not so, and there it is slowly and systematically killing Kenyans. So when I look at the coronavirus that you load on top of every single thing that Kenyans are burdened with, there is going to be this complete fallout, which will include xenophobia. In fact, I must confess, when I was driving here this morning, I saw some Chinese gentleman jogging, and I wondered, was he one of those who's supposed to self-quarantine and he hasn't quarantined himself? So I ask myself that when we have a government that is unable to establish the most basic protocols for disaster preparedness response, while the rest of the world is getting ready, we are here just ushering in planes. No wonder Kenyans are losing their tempers and losing the plot. And we don't want to go down the path of xenophobic attacks against Chinese. No matter the fact that many of us are being forced to worship the Chinese dragon because of the insatiable appetite for debt that this government has, no matter the fact that this country seems to have found itself at the ruling class in the grip of Chinese debt, we are still, as Kenyans, concerned about our health. We are saying, let this not also kill us. Because trust me, even if the mortality rates are low, if it hits us, we shall drop like flies. I kid you not, because we are not prepared and we are not ready. Good luck to CS Kagwe. Let's see. Let's hope there can be a level of transparency. And by the way, karma is real. Maybe some of the first people to get affected by the coronavirus will come from the same mafia house that has siphoned and stolen so much money. This is part of the loss of public trust, is that we cannot trust the government to utilize resources effectively. And back to Nairobi County, if the central government, therefore now, Ministry of Health, is responsible for health in Nairobi, 4+ million people. What if coronavirus checks in and we are here behaving as though it's not going to happen? What are the protocols in place? I'm not saying Sonko's government would have done any better, but if you look at it, as Kenyans, we are always between a rock and a hard place. And finally, the temerity of the Chinese embassy to lecture us against xenophobia and tell us this will happen. I can just imagine Ambassador Serem in China trying to pull a same stunt on the government. She would be PNG'd in 5 minutes and she'd be back in Kenya never to return. So there's something about how we allow ourselves to get talked down at. And when it comes to disease outbreak in Africa, people think that it actually originates from here. We have so many things brought to us. Coronavirus will be brought to us and eventually we will be stigmatized. And in terms of ministries that may have agreed or disagreed with, or departments that may agree or disagree with Justice Macau. And my hat's off to him, kudos, he's a hero, no matter what people say. Let's ask Ministry of Tourism. Let's say there's a coronavirus case reported at the coast. What will happen in terms of visitors coming to Kenya? If we do not give the appearance and the practice of being ready and prepared, we are undermining our already flagging economy.
Ken, how much do you see this Kenya-China relationship, which we can say a lot about it? We have said a lot here on this show about it. How much do you see it having an impact on how we handle this coronavirus thing, eventually?
Eventually, unless other institutions outside government comes out to fight the civil society, the courts, the Kenya-China relationship will eventually get coronavirus in Kenya. Because the level we've gone, the level we've reached, the level of our relationship with China, there is no going back. It's a marriage that has been cemented with huge loans and huge debts. The government, China is holding Kenya like this, and the Kenyan government cannot, for the lack of better word, Kenyan government cannot look back. So it's up to civil society, it's up to courts, it's up to Kenyans of goodwill to exercise their sovereignty and tell government we are not going to die as a nation courtesy of your relationship with China.
Having said that, Chero, this to you, could we pay too much attention to China and Chinese flights, but coronavirus in other countries as well?
Could we pay, sorry?
Could we be paying too much attention to what's happening or who's coming or who's not coming from China? We forget that we could get it from other countries.
No, I agree with Dismas, where there should be protocols. There should be protocols in place to screen every single person who's coming into the country. You remember when Ebola hit, and there were protocols to some extent or to a great extent in place. We need those kinds of protocols. But I also agree with Ken that what is this business about opening the gates just because we have been forced into a permanent and holy alliance? So yes, there could be a Chinese or non-Chinese individual who is arriving in Kenya via Emirates or via British Airways, via KLM. I'm not saying that's not possible, but that is why we must do the correct screening. But these floodgates wide open, because we are inside this Chinese dragon, this is something that we have to address, because not only are we going to pay all the way to our great-grandchildren these onerous debts that we have taken on. Now we are paying with our lives, we are paying with our literal lives. We have refused as Kenyans. And if the Chinese are that keen to continue and further, let them go and deal. In fact, let those officials who are keen to allow the floodgate of traffic unabated from China, let them be the ones to receive them at the airport, not Mr. Gire, who has now been suspended. And I sincerely hope that despite this statement that just came out that he was being suspended because he violated security protocols and so on, that is after the horse has bolted. We as Kenyans see him as a hero, and had he not alerted us to what was happening, we would be oblivious, roaming around and seeing people and not knowing that our government, because of the relationship it has with China, has refused to put its citizens first.
Is this something that the president should not leave to his cabinet CS, that his office should take charge of? Is it that important?
Obviously, as we indicated, that the principal responsibility of President Kenyatta is to secure our lives. And when coronavirus is coming in, you can even ignore our property. Because, you don't want to have property and everybody is dead. So it requires his unlimited attention and focus. And you realize nobody paid attention until he gave the executive order, which should have come several weeks back. And then for Cherotich, she needs to be reminded that you pays the piper. There's that saying about the...
He who pays the piper calls the tune.
Well, China has been paying the piper, and now they are calling the tune.
Not my tune.
Yeah,
they
no,
should
but
call Uhuru Kenyatta's tune, not my tune.
Well, now the way it's happening in Africa, it's very interesting that one of our neighbors, Zimbabwe, the president went an extra mile to send out a statement, and when it was aired back in China, he was told that we are very delighted about your statement. It was covered in all the major news bulletin. So you can see the way African presidents are actually bending backwards to make China happy. And for China, they'd like this virus to get out of China today, to go to South Korea, the way it's going to South Korea, to go to Europe, everywhere, so that people stop referring the coronavirus as something from China. They'd like to normalize, which is why there must be an urgent investigation. If President Kenyatta is not going toward an investigation, we must be told for that flight when it landed in Kenya, is there a probability that somebody was compromised? Because why would anybody be nervous that somebody has got footage of that plane landing? So we should ask ourselves, are there some public servants, maybe under the influence of, I don't know the currency in China, whether it's the dollar, whatever currency they use, maybe because of that they were compromised to allow the flight back. And then for Mutahi Kagwe, as a matter of urgency, he needs to be having regular briefings to tell us that everybody who is coming to Kenya is being screened, or in other words, to tell us what the state is doing to ensure that Morale back at Mososho doesn't get coronavirus.
All right. It is a story that we have been following up on, the coronavirus story. Of course, it's a very technical issue. We have an in-house Dr. Masikori who has been doing her best to try and educate and inform our viewers on what has been happening, of course, globally and here in the country in terms of preparedness. That is what Kenyans are asking about. So it's something that we have to keep analyzing and discussing and following up on from the Health Ministry. Let me take a look at some of your views now as we take a quick commercial break here on Inside Politics. Winnie Silas says on Twitter, the political elites do not want a peace battle, but I think most of the general public are welcome this with open arms. That is, of course, the BBI issue. We also have one here from Stephen Dolo says, Kenya unfortunately did not have a choice but to suspend the culprit after KA cited illegal photography. All airports require special permits for photography to be allowed for security reasons. Then the question would be, is company management issues more important than public interest? A tweet there from Stephen Dolo. One here from Julius Bosweti Amache says, Kenyan government has no precautionary measures to secure its citizenry from the dangerous coronavirus because we are not economically independent. Let the government be informed that our health comes first. If we think of paying China its debts, we owe her. And then a lot of tweets here on the BBI issue as well. One here from Jacob Njenga. Says Mokwa addressing Dismas. Kenya is always disrupted, and I think a disruption to eventually have and do the right thing would have been better for Kenyans. Talking about Nairobi issues, we'll come back to when we're talking to our viewers, and then we have one here from Zabi says, "Congrats for the new face with the new ideas," saying welcoming you to the show. Zabi on Twitter. We also have Jerry Kimu says, I don't know about the rest of the country, but Mount Kenya people are not interested in BBI, and these governors wasting time will not be re-elected. Watch this space. Liberal pothead says on Twitter, BBI nonsense is more dangerous than coronavirus. I agree. And then we have Kibet Noich who says, BBI is a pure politics. No matter how many times the constitution is changed and players are still the same, will always pull us backward